$11.7 billion. Everything they owned was worth too. You know the coupon, pale blue, 20% off one item. It arrived whether you asked for it or not. People kept them in the car, in the drawer by the sink. In the last yearly report it ever filed, the company calls them, quote, our well-known big blue coupons. They sold towels, pans, and the things you buy when you move house. In 2019, the group ran 1,533 shops and employed 62,000 people. 4 years later, 872 shops, 20,000 people. Some of those shops were sold off rather than closed. Most were not. On Sunday, the 23rd of April, 2023, the company filed for Chapter 11 in a New Jersey federal court. Chapter 11 is the American law for a business that cannot pay what it owes. The chief executive who signed it was Sue Gove. 4 years earlier, she was on a list of outsiders brought in to save the place. The charge here is not that they bought the wrong towels. It is that for 19 years, the money that might have saved this company went somewhere else. It went into buying their own shares, and I can show you the receipt because they printed it themselves. First, the thing itself. A buyback is simple. The company takes its own cash and buys its own shares back off the stock market. Then it parks them or cancels them. Fewer shares are left. So each share that is left owns a slightly bigger slice of the company. Why bother? Because the price usually goes up and the owners like that. Think of a pizza cut into 8. Buy 2 slices back and burn them. The pizza is not any bigger. Your slice just is. Half the American stock market does it. Now the receipt. In the last yearly report Bed Bath & Beyond ever filed, there is one sentence. Since 2004, through the end of fiscal 2022, we have repurchased approximately $11.731 billion of our common stock. That is their sentence, not mine. The same page says how many shares that bought, 265 million. Divide one by the other and you get what they paid. About $44 a share. Hold on to 44. It comes back at the end. And one man ran this company through almost all of it. Stephen Temers, chief executive from 2003. $9 in every 10 was spent on his watch. Now the defense, and I am going to make it properly. First, for most of those years, this company made real money. In the year to February 2015, it sold nearly $12 billion of goods and kept nearly $1 billion in profit. That is not a dying company. That is a healthy one handing cash back. Second, and this one is uncomfortable for me. In 2019, 3 investors went to war with this board. Their man Chris Kuiper said it plainly. They like to buy stock back at high prices, and when the price is low, they do not buy much. But read what they wanted instead. Buy shares back cheaper and spend less on the shops. Third, and this is the big one, the world changed underneath them. Towels and pans and storage boxes are exactly what people started buying online instead. And Bed Bath & Beyond had 1,500 buildings full of the things you no longer had to leave the house for. Fourth, that coupon, 20% off over and over for 20 years, teaches a customer one thing: your real price is a lie, and their own accounts say so. Why did the margin fall in 2018? Quote, in order of magnitude, an increase in coupon expense. First on the list, their words. Look at the whole decade. Of every dollar they took at the till in 2012, 40 cents was gross profit. By the end it was 23, and sales fell from nearly 11 billion to 5. That is a business bleeding out slowly, and no buyback did that. The customers did that. So here is the defense at its fairest. A shop chain built for the 2000s walked into the 2020s and lost. The buybacks were a symptom of confidence, not a cause of death. Most of that is true, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. Now the objection, and I want to put it properly, because it is the best argument against everything I am about to say. If the business was doomed, the money was doomed. Spend it on shares, spend it on shelves. It still ends in that court in New Jersey. At its strongest, $11.7 billion was never going to make anyone want a shop full of towels again. You cannot buy your way out of the internet. If that is right, the buybacks are a footnote here, not a cause. Because the apocalypse was not shared out evenly. Over the same 11 years, one American home goods chain more than doubled. Williams-Sonoma went from $4 billion of sales to over 8. Same country, same internet, same customers. One of them spent the decade building a business. The other spent it buying its own shares. Exhibit 1. The 7th of July, 2014. The board approves a new $2 billion buyback. The chief executive was Stephen Temers. Here is what he said in the company's own announcement. We also believe this is an opportune time and method to return value to our shareholders. The 17th of July, 10 days later. Until that morning, this company had no long-term debt at all. None. That day it sold $1.5 billion of bonds. A bond is just a loan you can trade. So the company borrowed $1.5 billion. Quote, the aggregate net proceeds from the notes were approximately $1.5 billion, which was used for share repurchases of the company's common stock. They borrowed it to buy their own shares and wrote down why. The same day, they hired a bank to buy $1.1 billion of stock, fast. 16.8 million shares at an average of $65.41 each. That is in the filing too. 9 years later, those same shares would have been worth about $5 million. They paid $1.1 billion for them. Exhibit 2. Across the 16 years their filings measure the same way, this company put $4.7 billion into the actual shops, shelving, tills, delivery trucks. Over the same years, it put $10.4 billion into its own shares, $2 into itself for everyone into the shops. If a cafe owner spent twice as much buying out his partner as he spent on the coffee machine, you would not call that investing. Exhibit 3, December 2020. The shops are shut half the time. The new chief executive, Mark Tritton, announces another buyback. Then the announcement says where the money came from. Quote, funding both programs with existing cash resources, primarily generated from the recent monetization of non-core assets. They sold parts of the company, and they used the money to buy their own shares. Then in November 2021, they went faster. A 3-year buyback plan finished inside 1 year, 2 years early. Tritton called it, quote, our ongoing confidence in our turnaround. The 21st of April, 2022. They file the yearly report. There is no warning in it. They tell the market their money will be enough to run the company for the next 12 months. They filed for bankruptcy 12 months and 2 days later. Their cash had fallen by $913 million that year. The same sentence tells you why. Quote, which included $589 million for share repurchases. Their money did not evaporate. They spent it on themselves, and they kept buying into the spring of 2022. In March 2022, an investor called Ryan Cohen told the world he owned 9.8% of this company. He wrote to the board that its plan looked far better in a slide deck than in practice. 5 months later, his stake was 11.8%, and he had bought nothing. The company had simply canceled enough of everybody else. Then he sold the lot in 2 days for about $68 million more than he paid. Remember $44. That is the average they paid across 19 years. 2 weeks before the bankruptcy, their own filing gives the last price for one of those shares, 30 cents. And everything the company owned, 872 shops, the warehouses, every towel on every shelf, added up to $2.2 billion. If you are the kind of person who wants to know how these things actually end, subscribe. We do one of these every week. Here is the last turn, and it is almost funny. 19 years and $11.7 billion got the share count down to 80 million. Then, to stay alive, they printed new ones. By July 2023, there were 782 million. That September, every one of them was canceled, worth nothing. Nobody broke the law. That is the uncomfortable part. Every one of those buybacks was approved by a board, filed in public, and applauded at the time. The permission they voted themselves reached nearly $13 billion. On the final accounts, 1.2 billion of it was still sitting there, unused.
Here is my ruling. On the charge of killing Bed Bath & Beyond, the buybacks are not guilty. The coupon did more damage and their own accounts say so. But the defense that the internet killed them is not proven. Williams-Sonoma sold the same things to the same country in the same decade and doubled. So on the charge of spending the survival money, guilty, and it is not close. I have run international markets for 17 years. Every business gets one bad decade. What decides whether you see the far side of it is what you did with the good one. They borrowed to buy their own shares. They sold pieces of the company to buy more. And they were still buying in the spring of 2022. They did not lose to the internet. They spent the money they needed to fight it. And there is a rule in here you can use on any company you own a piece of. Find the cash flow statement. Compare the line for buying back shares with the line for what they spend on the business itself. If the first beats the second, year after year, that is not investment. That is a slow goodbye. Next time on Business on Trial, the chain that shut 1,000 shops and called it growth,